The massive space station hung in the void like a crystal cathedral, its twisted spires reaching out toward the distant stars. Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of his small diplomatic shuttle, watching the Galactic Council station grow larger through the transparent metal walls. His hands gripped the railing as his stomach churned with nervous energy. Today would decide the fate of humanity. The shuttle docked with a soft thud that echoed through the metal corridors. Jake straightened his formal diplomatic uniform and checked his appearance one last time in the polished surface of the airlock door. His reflection showed a man in his 40s with graying hair and tired eyes, the weight of representing his entire species clearly visible on his face. The alien. Corridors were designed for beings much taller than humans. Jake had to crane his neck to see the ceiling, which curved away into shadows above him. Strange lights pulsed along the walls in patterns that hurt his eyes to look at directly. The air tasted metallic and sharp, filtered through systems meant for creatures who breathed different gases than humans did. 2 Vorthan guards escorted him to the council chamber. These beings looked like walking crystals, their bodies reflecting light in rainbow patterns as they moved. They spoke to each other in musical tones that sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Jake could not understand their language, but their body movements suggested they were discussing him with something less than respect. The council chamber was enormous, with 12 raised platforms arranged in a circle around a small area in the center where Jake would have to stand. Each platform held representatives from the major species that ruled the galaxy. The Vorthans glittered like living diamonds. The Nexari collective floated in columns of blue energy that shifted and twisted constantly. The Zalani looked like giant insects with too many eyes and legs that clicked against their platform as they moved. Jake walked to the center of the circle and felt very small. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above him, and the alien voices echoed strangely in the vast space. He had practiced his speech hundreds of times, but now his mouth felt dry, and his words seemed inadequate. Council leader Zethkari of the Vorthans rose from his platform. His crystal body caught the strange lights of the chamber and threw them back in patterns that made Jake dizzy to watch. When he spoke, his voice was like breaking glass, but the translation device in Jake's ear turned it into cold, precise words. Human Ambassador Morrison, you stand before this council to answer for the crimes of your species. Humanity has violated the expansion protocols by establishing colonies on 17 worlds without proper authorization. Your people ignored warnings about genetic modification programs that violate the natural order laws. Most serious of all, humans have shown aggressive tendencies toward other species and continue to expand your territory despite clear boundaries set by this council. Jake took a deep breath and stepped forward. Honored council members, humanity acknowledges that we have grown quickly and perhaps made mistakes in our eagerness to explore the galaxy, but we have never attacked another species unprovoked. Our genetic modifications are used only to help our people adapt to new worlds and live longer, healthier lives. We seek only to find our place among the stars and contribute to galactic civilization. A sound like angry bees filled the chamber as the Zalani representative spoke. The translator made the buzzing into words. Contribute? Your species consumes resources at an alarming rate. You reproduce too quickly. You modify your bodies in ways that disturb the natural balance. Other young species learn to control themselves, but humans always push forward, always want more. The Nexari Collective's energy column flickered and pulsed as it communicated. The human mind is chaotic and unpredictable. Unlike other species, you resist the calming influences that bring peace to civilized beings. This makes you dangerous to the stability we have maintained for thousands of years. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but forced himself to remain calm. We resist control because we value freedom. We explore because we are curious. We modify ourselves because we believe in improvement. These are not crimes. They are the very qualities that have allowed us to reach the stars in such a short time. Zethkari's crystal form seemed to grow brighter, casting sharp shadows across the chamber floor. That is exactly why you are dangerous. You do not understand your place in the order of things. Young species must learn patience and restraint. They must accept guidance from their elders. But humans refuse to be guided. You insist on making your own path, regardless of the consequences. The other council members spoke in turn, each listing humanity's failures and dangers. The Corvani accused humans of being too violent. The Veshan Empire claimed humans disrupted trade routes with their aggressive expansion. The Altarian Republic worried that human genetic modifications would spread to other species and corrupt them. Jake listened to each accusation and tried to respond, but the council members were not interested in his explanations. Their minds were already made up. He could see it in their alien faces and energy patterns and crystal formations. This was not a trial. It was a sentencing. Finally, Zethkari spoke the words that Jake had been dreading. This council has reached a unanimous decision. Humanity is too dangerous and unpredictable to remain part of galactic civilization. You will return to your home system immediately. All human colonies beyond the Sol system must be evacuated within one standard galactic cycle. Any human vessels found outside the quarantine boundary after that time will be destroyed without warning. The words hit Jake like physical blows. You cannot do this. Millions of humans live on those worlds. They have built cities, started families, made lives for themselves. You are condemning an entire species to imprisonment in a single star system. The decision is final, Zethkari said, his crystal voice echoing through the chamber. Your species will have time to evacuate safely, but after that, the boundary will be enforced absolutely. Perhaps in isolation, humans will learn the discipline and restraint that you have failed to show as members of galactic society. Jake's hands clenched into fists at his sides. This is not justice. It is exile. You fear us because we are different, because we will not bow down and accept your version of civilization. But mark my words, Council Leader, this decision will come back to haunt you. Humanity has always grown stronger when faced with adversity. We will remember this day, and we will remember how you treated us. The council members did not respond to his words. The Vorthan guards moved forward to escort him from the chamber. As Jake walked between the crystal beings toward the exit, he heard Zethkari speak one final time. Take comfort in knowing that your exile serves the greater good. The galaxy will be safer and more stable without humanity's chaotic influence. Jake did not look back as the chamber doors closed behind him. 25 years had passed since the Great Exile, and Earth looked very different now. President Maria Santos stood at the window of her office in Armstrong City, the rebuilt capital on the moon's surface. Through the thick transparent aluminum, she could see the massive orbital construction yards that surrounded Luna like metal rings. Ships of a design the galaxy had never seen before moved between the scaffolding structures, their hulls gleaming with new armor and weapon systems. Evacuation had been completed just in time. Every human colony beyond the Sol system had been abandoned, their populations crammed into transport ships that barely had enough supplies for the journey home. Maria remembered those dark days when refugee camps covered half of Earth's continents, and the orbital stations around every planet in the system overflowed with displaced families. But humanity had adapted, as they always did. The crisis had forced them to work together in ways they never had before. The old nations of Earth had dissolved into the United Human Federation, a single government that could coordinate the massive projects needed for survival in isolation. Every human now served the common goal of rebuilding their civilization stronger than before Dr. Ben Clark floated in the zero-gravity laboratory deep inside the asteroid Ceres, watching his latest test subject through the observation window. The volunteer was a young woman who had agreed to undergo the newest genetic modifications. Her body was changing in real time, muscle fibers becoming denser, bone structure adapting to handle greater stress, her nervous system rewiring itself to process information faster than any unmodified human could manage. The genetic enhancement program had begun as a necessity. Humans needed to adapt to live permanently in space, on airless moons, and in the cramped conditions of their exile. But as the years passed, the modifications had become something more. Each generation of improvements built on the last, creating humans who were stronger, smarter, and more resilient than their ancestors. Men checked the readings on his instruments and smiled. This batch of modifications included resistance to the psychic influences that kept most alien species docile and compliant. The Council had used these subtle mental effects to control the behavior of younger civilizations, but humans had always been naturally resistant. Now they were becoming completely immune. The test subject opened her eyes, and Ben could see the change immediately. Her pupils dilated and contracted as her modified vision adapted to different light levels. When she spoke, her voice was clearer and more controlled than before. "I can feel the difference already, Dr. Clark. My thoughts are faster, clearer, and there's something else, something I can't quite describe. It's like I was seeing the world through fog before, and now the fog is lifted." Ben nodded and made notes on his tablet. "That's the psychic resistance taking effect. You're experiencing reality without the subtle influences that most species take for granted. How do you feel about the physical changes?" The woman flexed her hands and watched the enhanced muscles move under her skin. "Strong, very strong, and I can sense things I couldn't before. The vibrations in the station's hall, the electromagnetic fields from the equipment, even your heartbeat from across the room." In the shipyards of Jupiter, engineer Katie Phillips supervised the construction of the newest addition to humanity's secret fleet. The ship was longer than 3 city blocks and bristled with weapon systems that combined human innovation with reverse-engineered alien technology. The aliens had left behind equipment when they evacuated their diplomatic stations from human space, and human engineers had taken it apart piece by piece to understand how it worked. But understanding alien technology was only the first step. Humans had improved on every design, making weapons more powerful, engines more efficient, and armor stronger than anything the galaxy had seen before. The ship Katie was building could outrun any known alien vessel and carry enough firepower to destroy a small moon. "How long until she's ready for testing?" asked Captain Steve Adams as he joined Katie on the observation platform. Steve commanded the network of hidden monitoring stations that watched the quarantine boundary, and he had been pushing for more ships to patrol the border. 2 more weeks for the basic systems, another month for the advanced equipment, Katie replied. "But Steve, are you sure we need this much firepower? The aliens haven't tried to contact us in over 20 years. Maybe they've forgotten about us entirely." Steve's expression was grim as he pulled out a data pad and showed Katie the latest intelligence reports. "I wish that were true, but something big is happening out there. We've been intercepting fragments of alien communications, and what we're hearing is disturbing. Several of the Council species have gone completely silent. Their home systems show signs of massive destruction." Katie studied the data and felt a chill run down her spine. The images showed dead worlds, their surfaces burned clean of life. Entire star systems appeared to have been stripped of matter, leaving only empty space where planets used to orbit. "What could do this kind of damage?" she asked. "We don't know yet, but the aliens are scared, really scared. The few transmissions we've managed to decode mention something called the Devourers. Whatever they are, the Council is losing the fight against them." Lieutenant Commander Rachel Davis worked in the Deep Space Monitoring Facility hidden in the Kuiper Belt, far beyond Pluto's orbit. Her job was to listen to alien communications and try to piece together what was happening in the galaxy beyond. Human space. The work required patience and skill, as alien languages were complex and the signals often arrived damaged after traveling across vast distances. Today's intercept was different from the usual diplomatic chatter or trade negotiations. The signal came from deep in former Nexari territory, and the voice carried a tone of absolute terror that transcended species barriers. The core worlds are gone. The translation program rendered the alien words into flat, emotionless text that could not convey the desperation in the original voice. The devourers have consumed everything. Nexari Prime is nothing but crystallized ash. The defense fleet has been reduced to scattered particles. We estimate complete sector loss within 10 standard cycles. Rachel leaned forward in her chair and adjusted the signal filters to capture more of the transmission. The voice continued, growing weaker as if the sender was running out of power. Any surviving council members must implement Protocol Final Dawn immediately. The ancient containment has failed. The enemy adapts to our weapons faster than we can. Deploy them. They consume not just matter and energy, but the fundamental structure of space itself. The signal dissolved into random noise, leaving Rachel staring at her screens in shock. She had been monitoring alien communications for 15 years and had never heard anything like this. The panic in that voice was real, and if the Nexari collective was truly gone, then something terrible was spreading through the galaxy. She immediately transmitted her findings to Earth and the other monitoring stations. Within hours, the information reached President Santos and the Federation Council. Emergency meetings were called, and the few remaining alien experts were brought out of retirement to analyze the data. The conclusion they reached was disturbing, but not entirely surprising. The galaxy was facing a threat that the Council could not handle alone. The same Council that had exiled humanity 25 years ago was now dying, consumed by an enemy they could not defeat. President Santos called a meeting of the Federation's top military and scientific leaders. As they gathered in the secure conference room beneath Armstrong City, she looked at each face around the table. These were the people who had rebuilt human civilization from the ashes of exile, who had pushed their species to evolve beyond what anyone thought possible. "The question before us is simple," she said as the meeting began. "Do we help the people who cast us out, or do we let them face this threat alone?" Dr. Clark spoke first. "Our genetic modifications have made us different from what we were 25 years ago. We're stronger, faster, and immune to the mental influences that control other species. If this enemy defeated the Council races, we might be the only ones who can fight them." Captain Adams nodded in agreement. "Our ships are ready, and our people are willing. But we need to know more about what we're facing before we make any decisions." Katie Phillips looked up from her datapad, where she had been reviewing the latest intelligence reports. "If we're going to act, we need to do it soon. The destruction is spreading faster now, and if we wait too long, there might not be anyone left to save." President Santos stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ships that filled the space around Luna. Humanity had spent 25 years preparing for something, though they had not known what it would be. Now the time for preparation was ending, and the time for action was beginning. Admiral John Patterson stood on the bridge of the flagship Columbia as it crossed the quarantine boundary for the first time in 50 years. The moment felt historic, though not in the way anyone had hoped when humanity first reached for the stars. Behind him, a fleet of 30 ships followed in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with armor that no alien civilization had ever seen before. The boundary itself was invisible, marked only by the coordinates in their navigation computers. and the knowledge that crossing this line had once meant certain death. Now the human fleet moved through empty space where alien patrol ships should have been waiting to destroy any vessel that dared violate the quarantine. The silence was more disturbing than any threat could have been. "Admiral, we're receiving." "No response to our identification signals," reported Communications Officer Lynn Parker from her station. "The automated warning systems that used to guard this boundary appear to be offline." John nodded grimly and turned to his science officer, Dr. Helen Brooks, who was studying the sensor readings with growing concern. Her enhanced vision allowed her to process the complex data streams faster than any unmodified human could have managed, and what she was seeing made her modified nervous system send warning signals throughout her body. "What are you finding, Doctor?" John asked. Helen looked up from her instruments, her face pale despite the genetic modifications that usually kept enhanced humans calm under stress. "Sir, the sensor readings from the former Nexari territory are unlike anything in our databases. We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies, sections of space where matter appears to have simply ceased to exist, and energy signatures that don't match any known technology." The fleet continued deeper into what had once been the heart of galactic civilization. John remembered studying star charts as a young officer, memorizing the locations of the great alien homeworlds and their vast trade networks. Now those same charts showed systems that registered as empty space, as if entire solar systems had been erased from reality. Captain Rick Turner commanded the scout ship Horizon, which moved ahead of the main fleet to investigate the ruins more closely. His ship was smaller and faster than the others, designed for reconnaissance missions in dangerous territory. As they approached the coordinates where Nexari Prime should have been, Rick found himself staring at something that challenged his understanding of physics. The planet was still there, but it had been transformed into something that hurt to look at directly. What had once been a world of crystal cities and energy gardens was now a sphere of what appeared to be frozen fire, its surface covered in patterns that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. "Landing party preparation complete, Captain," reported Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster from the shuttle bay. Amy had volunteered to lead the ground mission, despite the obvious dangers. Her enhanced body better equipped to handle unknown hazards than unmodified humans would have been. Rick authorized the landing, though every instinct told him it was a mistake. The shuttle descended through the planet's atmosphere, which now consisted of particles that glowed with their own inner light. When they landed near what had once been the Nexari capital city, Amy and her team found themselves walking through streets that existed in too many dimensions at once. The buildings were still recognizable as Nexari architecture, but they had been changed in fundamental ways. Walls curved through space that seemed to fold back on itself, and doorways led to rooms that were larger on the inside than the buildings that contained them. The team's instruments went haywire, trying to measure distances that changed depending on the angle of observation. "Captain Turner, we're finding data cores in the ruins," Amy reported through her communication device. The Nexari stored their memories in crystal matrices, and some of them survived whatever did this. Amy's team carefully extracted the crystal cores and brought them back to the shuttle. When they plugged the alien memory devices into their computers, the results were both fascinating and terrifying. The crystals contained the final moments of the Nexari collective, recorded as they faced an enemy, unlike anything they had ever encountered. The images that played on their screens showed creatures that seemed to exist partially outside normal space and time. They moved through solid matter as if it were empty air, and their touch caused reality itself to unravel. Worse still, the recordings showed that these beings could learn and adapt, changing their approach each time the Nexari found a way to hurt them. Admiral Patterson received Amy's report while the Columbia investigated the ruins of another former council world. The Vorthan Empire's crystal cities were dark and lifeless. their inhabitants reduced to scattered fragments that still glowed with residual energy. The proud civilization that had once ruled 1,000 star systems was now nothing more than crystalline dust scattered across dead worlds. Dr. Brooks analyzed the pattern of destruction as the fleet moved from system to system. Each world showed the same signs of attack, but the method had evolved between locations. Whatever was responsible for this devastation was learning from each encounter, becoming more efficient at destroying advanced civilizations. Admiral, I'm detecting something significant in the Zalani Federation territory, Dr. Brooks reported as she studied the long-range sensors. There are still active energy signatures in their core systems, but they're unlike anything in our databases. The fleet changed course toward the Zalani homeworld, hoping to find survivors who could explain what had happened to the galaxy. As they approached the system, they found the insectoid aliens' bioships drifting in space like empty shells. The organic vessels that had once pulsed with life now showed no signs of activity, their hulls covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when observed. Captain Lisa Harper led a boarding party onto one of the larger bioships, her enhanced senses immediately detecting that something was fundamentally wrong with the vessel. The corridors that should have been warm and alive felt cold and dead, but there was still some kind of activity deep within the ship's core. They found the ship's crew in the central chamber, but the Zalani were no longer truly alive. They're insectoid. Bodies had been transformed into something between organic matter and crystalline structure, and their multiple eyes glowed with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. When Lisa tried to communicate with them, the creatures responded with sounds that her translation device could not process. One of the transformed Zalani managed to speak in broken galactic standard, its voice distorted by whatever had changed. Its vocal cords. The garden must be pruned, it said, the words coming out in a mechanical rhythm. Life grows too complex. Reality becomes unstable. The devourers restore balance. Lisa tried to ask more questions, but the creature had already lost the ability to communicate coherently. Its transformed body began to dissolve into the same geometric patterns that covered the ship's hull, leaving behind only a faint energy signature that quickly faded to nothing. The boarding party returned to their ship with recordings of the encounter, but the information they had gathered raised more questions than it answered. The devourers appeared to be some kind of cosmic force that viewed advanced civilizations as a threat to the stability of reality itself. Admiral Patterson called a meeting of his senior officers as the fleet regrouped in empty space between the two dead systems. The holographic display in the Columbia's briefing room showed the extent of the devastation they had discovered, with red markers indicating worlds that had been completely destroyed and yellow ones marking systems where some kind of activity remained. The pattern is clear, Dr. Brooks explained to the assembled officers. These devourers target advanced civilizations that have developed certain types of technology. The more sophisticated a species becomes, the more likely they are to attract attention. Captain Turner leaned forward in his chair, his expression grim. If that's true, then humanity should be next on their list. Our technology is more advanced than anything the Council species ever developed. Amy Foster, who had led multiple ground missions to the ruined worlds, shook her head. I don't think it's just about technology. From what we've seen, the devourers seem to target civilizations that follow certain patterns of development. The Council species all pursued similar paths, trying to transcend physical limitations and manipulate fundamental forces. But humanity developed differently, John realized. Our exile forced us to focus on enhancement and adaptation rather than transcendence. We embraced our physical nature instead of trying to escape it. The implications of this discovery were staggering. Humanity's exile, which had seemed like punishment 50 years ago, might have been the very thing that saved them from the fate that had befallen the rest of the galaxy. Their isolation had forced them to develop along different lines, creating a civilization that the Devourers might not recognize as a threat. But as the fleet prepared to investigate the galactic core where the destruction had apparently originated, they received a signal that changed everything. Deep space monitors detected a transmission from the ruins of the Galactic Council Station, weak and fragmented, but unmistakably a call for help. Someone had survived the destruction, and they were calling for aid that only humanity could provide. The Galactic Council Station hung in space like a broken dream, its once magnificent crystal spires twisted into impossible shapes that hurt to look at directly. Admiral Patterson's fleet approached the massive structure carefully, their sensors detecting energy patterns that defied every known law of physics. Parts of the station seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, while other sections appeared to phase in and out of reality completely. Commander Julie Chun piloted the boarding shuttle through the station's docking bay, which had been warped into a spiral that led nowhere and everywhere at the same time. Her enhanced nervous system allowed her to navigate the distorted space where unmodified humans would have become hopelessly lost. But even with her improvements, the journey made her feel sick and disoriented. The boarding party consisted of 12 enhanced humans, each one equipped with the latest protective gear and weapons that had never been tested against an enemy like this. As they moved through the station's corridors, they found themselves walking through spaces that folded back on themselves, where up and down changed depending on which direction they were facing. Dr. Sarah Williams carried scanning equipment that was recording everything they encountered, though the readings made no sense according to conventional science. Walls that should have been solid showed as empty space on her instruments, while areas that appeared to be open corridors registered as dense matter. The station had been fundamentally changed by whatever force had attacked it. The gravitational fields in here are completely unstable, Sarah reported through her communication device. We're walking through areas where the basic laws of physics appear to be optional. The team followed emergency lighting that pulsed in patterns that seemed almost alive, leading them deeper into the station's core. Along the way, they passed chambers where the remains of alien technologies lay scattered like broken toys. Equipment that had once controlled the fate of entire civilizations was now reduced to fragments that glowed with residual energy. In the HFY Central Council Chamber, they found the survivors. 7 of the original 12 council members were still alive, though they had been changed in ways that challenged the definition of life itself. Seth Kare of the Vorthens existed now as a shifting pattern of light and crystal that barely held together, his once solid form constantly dissolving and reforming. The Nixari, collective representative, had become a column of energy that flickered like a dying flame, while the Zelani delegate existed as a swarm of geometric shapes that moved in complex patterns through the air. Each of the survivors had been transformed by their encounter with the Devourers, reduced to the barest essence of what they had once been. Commander Chun approached Zethkari carefully, her enhanced senses detecting the massive energies that barely contained his consciousness. When she spoke, her voice echoed strangely in the warped space of the chamber. Council Leader Zethkari, I am Commander Julie Chun of the United Human Federation. We received your distress signal and came to investigate. The shifting pattern of light that had once been the proud Vorthan leader pulsed with recognition. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once, the words barely coherent as his consciousness fought to maintain some form of communication. Humans, the voice whispered, carrying tones of surprise, regret, and desperate hope. You returned. We did not expect that you would return. Julie exchanged glances with Dr. Williams before responding. We detected the destruction across the galaxy and came to learn what happened. Can you tell us about the Devourers? The energy pattern that represented Zethkari's consciousness flickered and dimmed as if the effort of communication was draining what little remained of his existence. Not invaders from distant stars. Worse than that. They are the universe's immune system, awakening when reality itself becomes threatened by too much complexity. Dr. Williams stepped forward, her scanning equipment recording everything as the dying alien continued his explanation. Every few million years, they emerge to cleanse the galaxy of civilizations that have pushed too far into dangerous knowledge. We triggered their awakening by manipulating dimensional barriers and quantum consciousness transfer. The Nexari Collective's energy column pulsed with agreement, adding its own fragmented communication to the explanation. The Devourers learn. From each cleansing cycle, they have adapted to recognize the patterns that advanced civilizations follow. They target not just what we built, but the potential for building it again. Julie felt a chill run through her enhanced nervous system as she began to understand the implications. You're saying they destroy the possibility of advanced civilization, not just the civilizations themselves? Yes, Zethkari's consciousness struggled to maintain coherence. They consume the knowledge, the potential, the very concepts that allow life to become complex. After each cleansing, the galaxy must start over from the beginning. The Zelani swarm of geometric shapes moved closer, forming patterns that somehow conveyed meaning directly to the humans' minds. The message was one of profound regret and desperate hope. We exiled you to protect the galaxy from human aggression, but we were wrong. Your isolation prevented you from following the same path that doomed us. Dr. Williams studied her readings and made a connection that sent shock waves through her enhanced thought processes. The genetic modifications, the different approach to technology, the resistance to psychic influence, humanity developed along completely different lines because of the exile. Precisely, the dying consciousness of Zethkari confirmed. The Devourers recognize patterns of development that lead to dimensional manipulation and consciousness transfer. But humans pursued physical enhancement and adaptation instead. You embraced your limitations rather than trying to transcend them. Commander Chun realized the full scope of what they were learning. The exile saved us, because it forced us to become something the Devourers don't recognize as a threat to universal stability. The energy patterns that represented the Council survivors grew dimmer as they used the last of their existence to communicate this vital information. There is more you must understand. The Devourers are not evil in any way that organic life can comprehend. They believe they are preserving the universe by preventing reality itself from becoming unstable. How do they determine what constitutes a threat? Julie asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. Any civilization that develops technology capable of affecting the fundamental structure of space and time, came the response from multiple sources at once. Dimensional travel, consciousness uploading, matter conversion at the quantum level. These are the markers they watch for. Dr. Williams checked her equipment and confirmed what she was seeing in the energy readings. The survivors are fading fast. Whatever is keeping them alive won't last much longer. Zethkari's consciousness made one final effort to communicate, his voice growing weaker with each word. The Devourers are moving toward the remaining inhabited systems. Billions of survivors still live in the outer regions of the galaxy, but they will be found eventually. Only humanity has the technology and immunity to the Devourers' influence that might be able to stop them. How can we fight beings that exist partially outside normal space and time? Julie asked. Not fight, the Nexari energy column flickered. Negotiate. The Devourers can be reasoned with, but only by a species they do not perceive as a threat to universal stability. They might listen to humans where they would not listen to us. The geometric patterns that had been the Zelani delegate formed one final message before dissolving completely. Find them at the galactic core. Offer them something no species has ever been able to offer before, a partnership in maintaining cosmic balance rather than fighting against it. As the last of the Council survivors faded from existence, their final energy signatures were absorbed into the warped structure of the station itself. Commander Chun and her team found themselves alone in the twisted chamber, surrounded by the Yend, remains of a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Dr. Williams completed her scans and gathered the data cores that contained the Council's final records. The information they had collected would change humanity's understanding of their place in the universe, but it also presented them with a choice that would determine the fate of all remaining life in the galaxy. As the boarding party made their way back through the station's impossible corridors to their shuttle, Julie considered the implications of what they had learned. Humanity had been cast out as dangerous and unpredictable, only to discover that those very qualities might be what the galaxy needed to survive. The shuttle docked with the Columbia, and Admiral Patterson listened to their report with growing amazement and concern. The human fleet now had the information they needed to understand their enemy, but they also faced a responsibility that no species in galactic history had ever been asked. Shoulder. In the communications center of the flagship, technicians detected new signals from the galactic core. The Devourers were moving again, their attention turning toward the remaining pockets of life scattered throughout the outer systems. Time was running out, and humanity would have to decide whether to risk everything in an attempt to save the survivors of civilizations that had once rejected them. Fleet Admiral Linda Shaw stood on the bridge of the massive flagship Unity as it led the largest human armada ever assembled toward the galactic core. Behind her, 300 ships followed in formation, their crews consisting entirely of enhanced humans whose modified biology allowed them to function in the warped reality that surrounded the Devourer stronghold. The journey to the core had taken 6 months, during which the human fleet had watched entire star systems disappear from their sensors as the Devourers continued their work. The destruction was accelerating, and long-range communications had detected panic among the few remaining alien survivors scattered throughout the galaxy. As they approached the central region, space itself began to behave strangely. Stars appeared in impossible colors, and planets orbited in patterns that violated the laws of gravity. The Devourers had transformed this entire area into something that existed according to different physical principles, a place where reality, bent to accommodate their alien needs. Dr. Chris Evans worked frantically in the Unity's science laboratory, trying to decode the communication patterns that the Devourers used to coordinate their activities. His enhanced brain could process information at speeds that would have been impossible for unmodified humans. But even with his improvements, the alien signals were nearly incomprehensible. Admiral Shaw, I think I'm starting to understand their language, Chris reported through the ship's communication system. It's not based on sound or electromagnetic radiation like most species use. They communicate by manipulating the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Linda acknowledged the report while studying the tactical display that showed Devourer activity throughout the core region. The entities moved through space in ways that defied conventional understanding, appearing and disappearing at will while reshaping matter and energy according to their incomprehensible purposes. Captain Karain Allen commanded the advanced squadron that made first contact with a Devourer patrol near the edge of the core region. Her ship, the Defiance, was equipped with weapons that operated on principles completely different from anything the galaxy had seen before. When the Devourers attacked, Karen discovered that human technology could actually hurt them. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. The Devourers struck with weapons that unraveled the basic structure of matter, turning sections of space into regions where nothing could exist. But the human ships adapted, their crews using their enhanced reflexes and modified nervous systems to navigate through attacks that would have destroyed any other species. Karen's weapons officer, Lieutenant Tom Baker, fired the ship's primary cannon at a Devourer entity that appeared as a shifting geometric pattern against the starfield. The energy beam struck the creature and caused it to recoil, its form becoming less stable as the human weapon disrupted whatever held it together. Direct hit, Tom reported with amazement. The target is showing signs of damage. Our weapons actually work against them. But the Devourers adapted quickly, just as the dying council members had warned. By the time Karen's squadron engaged a second group of entities, the creatures had already modified their defenses to better resist human weapons. The battle became a deadly game of evolution, with both sides constantly changing their tactics and technology. Admiral Shaw realized that direct combat would not be enough to defeat an enemy that could adapt to any weapon. She ordered the fleet to proceed to the Devourer Nexus at the very center of the galaxy, where intelligence reports suggested the entities maintained some kind of central command structure. The Nexus was a structure that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, its form impossible for unenhanced minds to comprehend. General Tony Brooks led the ground assault teams that would attempt to board the Nexus and make contact with whatever intelligence controlled the Devourers. Tony's soldiers were the most heavily modified humans ever created, their consciousness enhanced to the point where they could perceive and navigate through multidimensional space. As they approached the Nexus in specially designed boarding craft, they found themselves entering a realm where the normal rules of existence no longer applied. Inside the Nexus, corridors led in directions that had no names, and rooms contained more space than the structure that held them. Tony's team moved through architecture that shifted and changed around them, guided by their enhanced senses and the navigation equipment that Dr. Evans had designed specifically for this mission. At the heart of the Nexus, they found the Devourer. Intelligence. It was not a single entity, but rather a collective consciousness that spoke through patterns of reality distortion that caused physical pain to observe directly. When it communicated, its voice came from the structure of space itself. New pattern detected, the intelligence said, its words causing the walls around Tony's team to ripple and flow. Classification unknown. Threat assessment in progress. Tony stepped forward, his enhanced nervous system allowing him to function. Despite the overwhelming sensory input from the alien environment, we are humans. We come to offer partnership, not conflict. The Devourer intelligence paused, and the distortions in space around them shifted to new configurations as it processed this unprecedented communication. Partnership concept not recognized. Species either threat or non-threat. No intermediate. Classification exists. Dr. Sarah Williams, who had joined the ground team despite the danger, activated the recording equipment she had brought from the ruined council station. We have evidence that you are the universe's immune system, protecting reality from civilizations that become too complex. But what if there was another way? The playback of the council survivors' final messages caused the Devourer intelligence to react with what might have been surprise. The space around the human team stabilized slightly as the entities focused their attention on the information being presented. Council species understanding was incomplete, the intelligence responded. They perceived cleansing as destruction, but purpose is preservation. Reality requires maintenance to prevent cascade failure of universal constants. Tony seized the opportunity to present humanity's proposal. What if you had partners who could help maintain cosmic stability without triggering the cleansing cycles? Humans developed differently because of our isolation. We enhanced ourselves instead of trying to transcend physical existence. The Devourer. Intelligence considered this for what felt like hours, though time moved strangely in the multidimensional space of the Nexus. Around them, the structure pulsed with energy as the entities debated among themselves in ways that human minds could barely perceive. Proposal has merit, the intelligence finally responded. Human development pattern shows adaptation rather than transcendence. Genetic modifications enhance existing capabilities without violating fundamental stability requirements. Dr. Williams pressed their advantage. We can serve as guardians, helping younger species develop along stable paths while preventing the kind of dangerous research that triggers cleansing cycles. The galaxy doesn't have to be periodically destroyed if it's properly maintained. The negotiation continued for days as both sides worked out the details of an unprecedented agreement. The Devourers would halt their current cleansing cycle in exchange for humanity's commitment to serve as cosmic gardeners, guiding galactic civilization while preventing it from becoming a threat to universal stability. Captain Paul Jackson, monitoring. The negotiations from the Unity's bridge detected massive changes in Devourer activity throughout the galaxy. The entities were withdrawing from the systems they had been attacking. Their work halted for the first time in millions of years. When the agreement was finally reached, Admiral Shaw broadcast the news to the surviving populations scattered throughout the galaxy. The message was simple but profound. The destruction was over, and a new age was beginning. The Devourers began the process of restoring the damaged systems, using their reality manipulation abilities to rebuild worlds that had been destroyed and resurrect civilizations that had been consumed. But this time, the restoration came with guidance from human advisors who would help ensure that the same mistakes were not repeated. As the human fleet prepared to return to the galaxy, Linda Shaw reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. 50 years ago, humanity had been cast out as dangerous and unpredictable. Now they were returning as the guardians of all galactic life, their exile having prepared them for a responsibility that no species had ever been asked to shoulder. The surviving council species, restored but humbled by their experience, welcomed humanity's leadership with gratitude and respect. The same qualities that had once made humans seem threatening, their adaptability, their refusal to accept limitations, their resistance to control, were now recognized as exactly what the galaxy needed to survive and thrive. Jake Morrison, now elderly but still serving as a diplomatic advisor, stood once again in the council chamber as it was rebuilt on a new station. This time, however, he was not defending humanity against charges of aggression. Instead, he was helping to establish the new order that would govern galactic civilization under human guidance. The irony was not lost on him. The Council had exiled humanity to protect the galaxy from human influence,